Willie Rennie.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on pay negotiations between teaching unions and COSLA in light of EIS rejecting the most recent offer and reports that industrial action is set to continue.
Cabinet Secretary Shirley-Anne Somerville.
It is very disappointing that the EIS has rejected outright the latest pay offer without consulting their members. This is the fifth offer to the unions, which would have meant an 11.5% increase or £5,000 in April for most teachers, and a cumulative increase of almost 30% since January 2018. We will continue to work closely with our union and local government partners to resolve this dispute and deliver a fair and sustainable settlement for teachers. It is deeply regrettable that the EIS are pressing ahead with industrial action while further discussions are taking place this week, and I continue to urge the unions to suspend industrial action while these talks are ongoing.
Willie Rennie.
After the pandemic, young people just can't afford any more lost days of education. So I want to understand what went wrong in this circumstance. I assume that a new offer was only made to teachers when the Cabinet Secretary was confident that it would be accepted. The Cabinet Secretary had waited weeks for that moment. So can the Cabinet Secretary explain what went wrong and why the situation was so badly misjudged?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think what the Government has tried to do, along with our colleagues in local government, is to work to find a new offer that is fair and sustainable. And it needs to be fair, but it needs to be sustainable and affordable for government. So we set ourselves a challenge and set everybody else a challenge that we needed to find a compromise and we needed to find a new way forward. And that is what we have tried to do, to improve the offer for 22-23 and to suggest a way of working over a two-year period. I am very disappointed that this wasn't taken to members, at least. I recognise that some of the other unions have done that, and I wait with interest to see what happens when that result comes back. But I think it is deeply disappointing that when we have all got to compromise in a situation like this in a pay dispute, the Government has attempted to do so. And it is unfortunate that we will not hear the voice of EIS members at this time.
Willie Rennie.
The relationship with the trade union EIS does seem to be deteriorating. I mean, there's no doubt that when the revised pay offer was made to the EIS, the BBC were told first. Why was that allowed to have happened? And secondly, the Cabinet Secretary criticised the EIS for not putting the latest pay offer to members. Is it the job of the Cabinet Secretary to tell union leaders how to do their job?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, when it comes to members of the media knowing about what's happening in disputes, I think it is very difficult if we are getting to the point where it's not just Scottish Government but local government, COSLA, and particularly then all of council leaders starting to know what's happening in a negotiation, that some of that material comes into the public domain. That is deeply disappointing, and I don't think that helped anybody that that came into the public domain in the way that it did. We will continue to try and work very carefully with the trade unions. I wouldn't dream of telling trade union leadership or indeed trade union members what to do. I highly respect the mandate that the unions have and the right of a trade union to carry out industrial action. I simply say that at this point, when it's gone on for as long as it has, and when it is impacting on children and young people, particularly in the run-up to exams, it is disappointing that they've taken that decision. It's their right to take that decision, but I think it is disappointing because I think it would have helped everyone to gauge the feeling of that. But they have made that
Briefly,
decision.
Cabinet Secretary.
And as I said within my original reply, the talks are ongoing this week to see if we can come to a resolution.
Stephen Kerr.
Presiding Officer, it is impacting pupils and their families, this industrial action. And isn't it funny that when the EIS targeted the constituencies of Nicola Sturgeon, John Swinney and Shirley-Anne Somerville, that more money appeared? Because in this chamber, 4 times on the 7th of February, once on the 17th of January, twice on the 10th of January, twice on the 22nd of February, 8 times in less than 3 months, the Cabinet Secretary said there was no new money that could be found for teachers' pay. Yet here we are, £153 million of new money on the table for a new pay deal. So where did the Cabinet Secretary find this new money? And why had it taken so long for any offer to be put on the table for negotiation?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think, once again, Presiding Officer, not for the first time, Mr Kerr seems to not grasp some of the detail on this. The decisions that we've taken are because we did rise to the challenge and the fact that we did need to compromise. That is not without its consequences. Not without its consequences that we have done so, but we have tried exceptionally hard, and we have done that for the 22-23 offer. The money that Mr Kerr refers to is, of course, over 2 years, and we have, again, tried exceptionally hard in 23-24 to find funding to have a fair and additional settlement. Now, I'm not aware, I could be wrong, Presiding Officer, but I'm not aware that Mr Kerr or anyone else has approached the Deputy First Minister, as he went through the budget process, to suggest another way forward, more money that could be found. Now, if he hasn't done that, Presiding Officer, I would suggest this is yet another vacuous attempt by Mr Kerr and not raising the debate whatsoever.
Michael Mara.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. With this year's exam diet due to begin in just 2 months, will the Cabinet Secretary intervene on behalf of those pupils who are set to miss an additional 6 days at this crucial point in the academic year? Will the Cabinet Secretary ensure the SQA makes adequate provisions for these young people who are adversely affected by strike action? And, to be blunt, what is the Cabinet Secretary doing to ensure that she helps rather than harms the education of young people, particularly in targeted constituencies like Dunfermline?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Mr Mara raises a very important point about the build-up to exams, and I think I hope that's something that we could all agree on in all parts of this dispute, that we need to resolve this. So clearly, the SQA has already made modifications to the national qualifications for 23. That's very important. They are clearly working as well on exam support, but more importantly as well, and in addition to the work through Education Scotland, the National Lee Earning offer, and the work that goes on with the Regional Improvement Collaboratives, is all there to assist young people in the build-up to their exams and during the exam diet. So we will ensure that all that information is there for pupils so that they know that the support is out there for them. I do absolutely recognise that this must be an exceptionally worrying time, particularly when we're seeing learning further disrupted. But that's why support has been put in place, not just through the SQA, not just through Education Scotland, but also the regional collaboratives and the local authorities, as well as Scottish Government, working together to support our young people at this difficult time.
Katie Clark.
Surveys of members by the EIS Union have exposed the extent to which many teachers no longer find the job rewarding. Some teachers report they're using food banks, working second jobs and considering leaving the profession for supermarket roles paying just 50p an hour less. Does the Cabinet Secretary accept that there is no sustainable plan for teacher retention and that there is an urgent need for a real terms increase in pay?
Cabinet Secretary.
And that's why we're working very hard to try and find a solution to this. But again, I make the point that I made to Mr Kerr. Unless colleagues in the Labour Party came forward during this budget process and suggested where that new money would come from to support that real terms increase, then again we're seeing grandstanding but no solutions. In terms of what happens to actual teachers in terms of a pay offer, we did work with local government to suggest a differentiated offer that would help those on the lowest grades, and yes, that did mean slightly less for those at the highest grades. That has been roundly rejected by all unions who want to see a flat rate increase right across the board, regardless of grades. Now, we would have liked to have worked on a progressive, differentiated offer, but that's not what the unions want, and if that's not what the unions want, we'll need to try and find a way through that.